Alright, thank you both for coming back to Shooting It Straight, a channel devoted to arming concealed carriers with factual information and proven shooting methods learned from real-life defensive shooting situations, which is quite the departure from what you may see on most other YouTube gun channels. Most others. Not all. There's some great ones out there. Now, in this video, I'm going to compare the techniques and methods used by several legendary modern-day gunfighters against what is currently being taught by the concealed carry instructors of today, and see if we are somewhat in tune with those older proven methods, or if we are pulling away from those lessons learned. And I'm doing this unedited, of course. Now, I have spent literally decades researching and studying actual modern-day gunfighters. I have studied legendary gunfighters such as Fairbairn and Sykes, Bill Jordan, Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper, Massad Ayoob, and Jim Cirillo, and more recently the retired Chicago PD Lieutenant Bob Stash. All of these guys that I just mentioned have survived multiple shootouts, and many of the techniques used by those legendary gunfighters were passed on to police officers across the nation. Me being one of them. Alright? Now let's examine a few of these modern but old school. A lot of people like to call these things old school and techniques and from old school gunfighters. But let's take a look at them, and then we'll compare their shooting methods to what our current breed of instructors are teaching now, and see what we can actually find out. Okay? Alright, well, we got Massad Ayoob. Well, you know, who in the hell doesn't know who he is? I have followed him my entire 25-year law enforcement career, and although I'm now retired, I still follow him closely. He has trained cops since 1974. He served as captain in the Grantham, New Hampshire Police Department until 2017. He has won countless shooting competitions. He has trained every level of law enforcement officer for more than 4 decades now, and had his first, I think I'm correct in this, he had his first gunfight at the age of 14 in his father's jewelry store. And he emphasizes and uses the thumbs down or tucked thumbs grip method, not the thumbs forward grip method. Now, he's the author of a dozen books and over 1,000 articles. He's the president of the Second Amendment Foundation. Massad he founded the Lethal Force Institute, or LFI to us old-timers, back in 1981. He is a court-recognized expert in the self-defense trials. He is the developer of several survival shooting techniques, which are still used by cops all over the country, and he is the premier authority today on all things related to defensive shooting. I would say that he is the single most biggest influence in law enforcement for the last 40 years. Now, let's take a look at a fairly recently retired Chicago PD Lieutenant Bob Stash. He's a 33-year veteran of the Chicago PD. He's worked in narcotics, violent crimes division, counterterrorism units, robbery, homicide, you name it, he's done it. He has pulled the trigger in 14 documented shootouts during his career. Here's a few nuggets of information from a recorded interview with Bob Stash by Massad Ayoob. At various points in his career, he carried either a Smith & Wesson Model 29 44 Magnum revolver or a Colt 1911 government model 45, or a Smith & Wesson model 4586 in 45, and later a SIG P220 in 45. He said he believes a person should carry the biggest caliber they can handle and in the most powerful loading available for that caliber. Remember, 14 shootouts. I think he knows what he's talking about here. And yes, 9mm plus P ammo was available and used back then by other cops. Out of those 14 shootings, one involved multiple snipers from gang members, and another was an extended gun battle with a barricaded suspect. These were the only two occasions that he required a reload or a magazine change. Now remember, he never carried a pistol with a capacity of more than 8 rounds, but we keep being told that we need 18-round magazines, preferably an extended magazine on top of that. All but 2 of the 14 shootouts happened inside of 15 feet. The other 2 involved the sniper incident I just spoke of and the barricaded incident. Also, out of the 14 shootings, a two-handed grip was used twice, possibly 3 times, he's not sure. Also, out of those 14 shootings, only 2 involved multiple offenders, and one of those was the gang-related sniper incident. He never did the traditional aim when shooting. You know, you close one eye and take aim. He never did that, naturally. He always brought the pistol up to eye level whenever he could. It was not always possible, but when he could, he would bring it up to eye level. And he used a technique that he referred to as a triangle of aim, which, by hearing him describe it, is the flash sight picture method. He didn't use any sort of pistol-mounted light, and the only modification he made were to switch out the sights for the XS Express big dot sights. He was a threat-focused type shooter, so all he had to do was see that big front sight on the bad guy and hit the bang switch. He did not use the popular thumbs forward grip method. He his preferred shooting stance is not yet known to me, because he never mentioned it in all the interviews I heard. But he did say that when the bullets were flying, he often found himself almost sitting on his ass because he was trying to make himself a smaller target, which he thinks is a necessary survival technique. Now, he carried spare magazines, not for the extra ammo, but instead he carried them in the event of a malfunction or other unforeseen damage to the magazine. That's why he carried spare magazines. Alright, now let's take a quick look at the legendary Jim Cirillo. Jim served in the U.S. Air Force during the Korean War and then joined the New York Police Department in 1954, where he later served as a supervisor in the infamous Stakeout Squad, from around 1968 to 1973. Now, this was a unit formed for the specific purpose of engaging a violent and deadly rash of armed robberies plaguing the city businesses at the time. Now, Cirillo engaged in 17 documented gunfights during that time. Now, get this. On his very first stakeout assignment, within the first 2 hours of his first stakeout assignment, he shot 3 gunmen. 3 gunmen that came in to rob this grocery store that he was in. Now, in fact, in the 1973 movie Dirty Harry, well, one of the Dirty Harry movies, it was a Magnum Force, 1973 Magnum Force. One of those scenes was based on one of Jim Cirillo's gunfights, and it was the grocery store robbery scene. So if you ever get a chance to watch that movie, you'll see that. Now, Cirillo was an author, and after his retirement, he trained many cops at the local, state, and federal levels, even the U.S. Treasury and U.S. Customs agents. He was also an instructor at FLETC, or FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. He was a major advocate of using the flash sight picture shooting method. Now, although he originally started off using the department-issued .38 revolver, he heavily favored and later used the .45 ACP. He was also a major fan of the .40 Smith & Wesson when it came out, which was after his retirement. He never used the thumbs forward grip method. His best quote is, "When you get into a gunfight, you'll wish you had the biggest, largest caliber handgun you can get your hands on." Alright. Now, although he was a big supporter of cops and concealed carriers participating in competitive shooting matches, he absolutely detested those high-speed matches, such as IPSC and USPSA, or any other competitive shooting match that ignored real-life scenarios or were not based on survival shooting. He felt that those matches would ingrain deadly habits for the defensive shooter. And that comes directly out of this book. Mr. Cirillo died in 2007. Alright, let's look at Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. Passed away in 2006. U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, and Korean War combat veteran. Founder of the famous Gun Sight Shooting Academy, which has trained law enforcement and military for decades. He was a professor, an author, founding president of IPSC, back when it was actually a practical survival-oriented shooting league. He was the inventor of the 10mm cartridge and the Bren 10 10mm pistol, and the father of modern combat shooting technique. By far one of the most respected and influential personalities in the art of pistol craft. The colonel was a huge fan of the Weaver stance. He was a huge fan of large calibers and was the developer of the flash sight picture shooting method. The colonel is also the original author of the 4 basic rules of firearm safety that we all know and use. Okay, so that's just some of those modern day legendary gunfighters. Now let's take a quick look at what 99%, and I say 99% because there are a small number of shooting and defensive shooting instructors out there today that do teach actual defensive shooting. Very few, but they are some out there. But let's take a quick look at what 99% of defensive shooting instructors today are teaching and advocating. Now, I harp on these things all the time, I know. And guess what? I will continue to harp on them until I get my point across, and these things are changed in the firearms training world. That's how much I believe in it. Here's what they're all teaching. The thumbs forward tactical grip method. They all swear it's the only way to properly grip your pistol because it's the only way to mitigate recoil. This is the only grip method you'll ever see on YouTube videos. Except the gunfighting legends never used it even once. Isn't that odd? Alright, speed. Everything, every single thing they teach comes down to speed. You need a lightning fast draw. You need to be able to fire 15 rounds in less than a second. I've never heard any of the gunfighting legends mention anything about speed in that regard. That's a little odd too. Alright, you need a gun with high capacity magazines. preferably high-capacity extended magazines, because of the looming zombie apocalypse, right? Listen, the number one reason for needing a magazine change is because you're missing your target. And the gunfighting legends seem to do just fine with revolvers and 8-shot 1911s. That's odd. Okay? Stand up straight, square up, and face your attacker head on in the popular please kill me isosceles stance. None of the pictures I've ever seen of these gunfighting legends on the range were ever in any form of the isosceles stance. Wonder why? Okay. Red dot optics and a D-cell flashlight on your high-capacity pistol is mandatory. It's all the rage today. Every instructor has their gun set up this way. The gunfighting legends, again, seem to do just fine without any of those crutches. How were they ever able to hit the bad guy without a red dot? How did that happen? How is it possible? Alright, look. What have we learned from these old school legends of gunfighting? Well, we've learned that they all have a few things in common. None of them used the popular thumbs forward grip when shooting. They all used a variation of the thumbs down method. Now, this also includes other people such as World IPSC champion Ross Seyfried, champion shooter Jack Weaver, and YouTubers like Hickok45, who also shot in IPSC matches, and Paul Harrell, who's also a survivor of a deadly shooting and winner of numerous state and national shooting matches. In fact, you can easily find a video of Masad Ayub speaking of and demonstrating this thumbs down grip on a Wilson combat segment. So quite obviously, it is shown that the popular thumbs forward grip is nowhere near as necessary as the instructors of today claim it is. It is nothing more than a tactical method that is in no way better than the old school thumbs down grip method. The only thing it does is increase the chances of causing a shooter-induced malfunction, and I think that point has been well proven. Alright? All of these gunfighting legends preferred larger calibers. Even those still alive today do. Again, on a Wilson combat segment, Mas Ayub states that while he prefers larger calibers, most older folks, such as himself, Bill Wilson, Ken Hackathorn, well, they go with a 9mm these days due primarily to their loss of hand strength. Because when you get older, you lose your strength. I can attest to that. It's true. Alright, magazine capacity appears to be a non-issue. Those old gunfighters preferred larger caliber over higher capacity. Exactly the opposite of today's current mindset. Okay, they all stress the perfection of basic fundamentals and marksmanship. Basic fundamentals and marksmanship over technology and ammo capacity, which again seems to be the opposite of what instructors of today are pushing. None of those old legends speak of the need for lightning-fast follow-up shots. And once again, just the opposite of that is stressed today and taught today. Alright, all of them shoot or shot from a modified Weaver or Chapman stance whenever they could actually acquire a stance, in the effort to reduce their profile to the attacker. Even Hickok45 and Paul Harrell use a modified Weaver or Chapman type of a stance. And, they seem to be excellent marksmen. Yet every single instructor today calls any sort of bladed stance old school and claims it's a terrible stance to use. Why is that? Well, it's because it's not a popular stance these days. Instead, you're taught to stand squared up, face to face with your attacker, so that you can politely offer him a clear, unobstructed path directly to the vital organ of his choosing. You know, just like in competition matches. It's obvious that the vast majority of defensive shooting instructors today are teaching almost exactly the opposite of what we have learned from these real-life legends who have survived multiple gunfights. Why is that? Well, I've said it before. Let me get a drink here. You've heard me say this before. They teach it because the current crop of instructors have no experience in gunfighting. They have no experience in the use of deadly force. They only know competitive shooting methods, so that's what they teach. They have nothing more than classroom training and were taught by other instructors who also had no real gunfighting experience. Now, this does not mean that they are poor instructors. It only suggests that they are all teaching the wrong techniques to the wrong segment of shooters. It is improper and it is a disservice to teach competitive shooting styles and methods to concealed carriers or defensive shooters. Plain and simple. Now, there's an instructor on YouTube that lists that he has attended over 40 certified shooting schools. Okay? But when every certified shooting school is teaching the same exact methods and techniques, what's the point? Shooting schools and academies are fine, but only if they are teaching the correct techniques for that correct shooting discipline. The problem is that it is dangerous to teach some of the competitive techniques to defensive shooters. Now, please note that I said some of these. Not all competitive methods or techniques are dangerous for defensive shooters, but some certainly are, and you need to know what those methods are. But my point in this video was to show you just how wide the gap has gotten between the realities of gunfighting and what's being taught to you today. How many instructors today have even a fraction of the experience and accomplishments possessed by those old school legends of gunfighting? None. Zero. And it shows. We are getting further and further away from the methods and lessons learned from actual real-life gunfights that have been proven to work, and moving closer and closer to theories taken from competitive shooting matches. I think that's a recipe for disaster unless we change it and get back to what has already been proven to work, old school or not. Seems pretty obvious that old school has saved lives, whereas new school is completely unproven. So, the choice is yours. Go with what has been proven to work, or risk your life and go with theories. And, that's where I stand on the topic of defensive training. So thanks for watching. I'm Antonius, and, I've only been shooting it straight with you. Ciao.